Adults can fake fear. Kids can't. So when a little girl sprinted into the diner, face streaked with tears, breath broken, body trembling, people felt the truth before she even spoke. But she didn't run to the manager. She didn't run to the police officer eating near the counter. She ran to Jason Statham, grabbed his arm like it was the last safe thing in the world, and cried, "Please, they took my brother." Nobody knew it yet, but those men had just made the worst mistake of their lives. Before we continue, thank you so much for watching and supporting these stories. If you enjoy emotional, real-life narratives where justice still means something, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support truly helps us bring more meaningful stories to the channel. The diner was the kind of place that still smelled like coffee and bacon from 20 years ago. Vinyl booths, chipped tabletops, a jukebox no one used anymore, just background noise for people trying to make it through another tired afternoon. Jason sat alone in a corner booth, nursing a black coffee that had gone lukewarm 15 minutes ago. He wasn't there for the food. He was passing through, killing time between flights, waiting for a call from a lawyer across town. It was supposed to be a quiet stop, a nowhere place on a nowhere day. Then the bell over the door screamed. The little girl burst in so fast she nearly slipped on the tiled floor. Her shoes skidded, her small hands slammed against the counter, and every head in the diner turned as one. She couldn't have been more than 6. Hair loose tangled, pink t-shirt stained, one sleeve stretched like someone had yanked it hard. Her cheeks were blotchy from crying, her breath came in sharp, panicked gasps. People stared, forks hovering halfway to mouths, conversations dying off in thin, awkward silence. Adults can fake fear, Jason had once told a friend on set. Kids can't. And now, watching this girl, he felt that truth in his bones. The manager stepped forward from behind the counter, face pinched with annoyance more than concern. "Sweetheart, you okay? You lost or something?" The girl scanned the room like she was underwater and trying to find the surface. Her gaze landed on the uniformed cop eating at a table near the window. For a second, it looked like she might run to him. But she didn't. Her eyes slid past the officer, past the manager, past every grown-up pretending they knew what to do, and locked onto Jason. He hadn't moved, just sat there, shoulders square in his plain black t-shirt, watching her with a steady, unreadable expression. Something in her seemed to recognize something in him. She stumbled toward his booth on shaky legs, grabbed his forearm with both hands like it was the last solid thing in a collapsing world, and cried out, voice cracking, "Please, they took my brother." The room froze. Jason's hand closed gently over her wrists, not prying her off, just anchoring her. Her words hung in the air like smoke. "Hey," he said quietly, "slow down for me, love, breathe." She tried, but her breathing only stuttered harder. The cop at the window finally pushed his chair back. "What's going on here?" he asked, already irritated at the interruption of his meal. Jason looked up at him without letting go of the girl. His eyes were calm, but there was an intensity there that made the officer pause mid-step. "Give her a second," Jason said. The manager didn't like that. "Sir, if she's lost, we can call." "She's not lost," Jason cut in. His voice was soft, but it carried. "Somebody took her brother." A murmur rippled through the diner. A couple in the booth behind Jason exchanged worried glances. A man near the restroom suddenly remembered he needed to be somewhere else and slid his wallet onto the table. Jason turned back to the girl. "What's your name?" Her lower lip trembled. Maddie." "All right, Maddie, I'm Jason." He loosened one hand, gave her fingers room to breathe without letting them go. "Where did you see your brother last?" "Outside," she sniffed. We were walking by the gas station, and then he had my backpack and he said we had to hurry 'cause Mom was waiting, and then—" Her words tangled up. Jason waited, letting her find them again. "Then the men came," she choked. "On the loud bikes. They laughed at us. One of them grabbed my brother and put his hand over his mouth, and he kicked and I screamed, and they told me to shut up, and then—" Her body shook. Jason could feel it through her grip. "Did they hurt you?" he asked, scanning her arms, her face, her neck. She shook her head. "Jay just pulled my shirt. They pushed me on the ground and then they took him. They put him on a bike and he was crying and they drove away and I ran and I ran and I couldn't find anyone and then I saw the lights here and." She broke off, sobs overtaking her. Jason clenched his jaw. Bikers, loud bikes, taking a kid in broad daylight within a mile of this place. He glanced toward the front windows. Through the glass he could see the quiet street, the gas station sign flickering 2 blocks down, the hazy line of the horizon behind it all. No bikes, no engines, no helmets lined up outside. Whoever they were already gone. The cop finally finished walking over, resting a hand on his belt. "Okay, kiddo, that's enough. You need to calm down. What's your last name? Where are your parents?" Maddie flinched away from him, tightening her grip on Jason's arm. Jason met the officer's eyes. "You got a radio?" he asked. "Excuse me." "Radio? You call this in while I get details from her. Amber Alert, description, direction of travel." The officer bristled. "I'm the one handling this, sir, you're just—" Jason tilted his head slightly, and whatever the cop had been about to say withered under that stare. "I'm the one she picked," Jason said quietly. "We can argue about rank later." There was something about the way he said it, steady, unblinking, that made the officer reach slowly for his radio despite himself. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12, he began, walking a few steps away. Jason refocused on Maddie. "How old is your brother?" 8, she whispered. "His name is Tyler. He's scared of loud noises. He doesn't like the bikes. He was trying to be brave." Jason swallowed. "You did good coming here, you hear me? You did everything right." She shook her head violently. "No, I didn't." I let go of his hand. Her guilt cut through the room. A woman at the counter covered her mouth. The fry cook turned away, suddenly too busy with the grill to look. Jason leaned closer, his voice barely above a breath. "They're the ones who did wrong, not you. I promise you that." The doorbell chimed again. The sound was ordinary, but something in it made Jason's spine go rigid. It wasn't the bell itself. It was the way the air changed when it rang, like the whole diner exhaled, then forgot how to inhale. Maddie stiffened. Jason felt her fingers dig into his arm hard enough to hurt. He didn't look toward the door right away. He watched her eyes instead. They went wide, all the color drained from her face. "They're here," she mouthed. Then he turned. 4 men stood by the entrance, leather vests over black t-shirts, jeans dusty from the road. They smelled like gasoline and cheap cigarettes even from across the room. Tattoos crawled up their arms and over their necks like inked ivy. Behind them, through the glass, Jason could see the hulking shapes of motorcycles lined along the curb. The leader, thick beard, sunglasses resting on his head, scanned the diner lazily. When his gaze landed on Maddie, his grin widened. "There she is," he drawled, like he'd spotted a lost puppy instead of a terrified child. Every muscle in Jason's body went still. The bikers didn't know who he was. To them, he was just a bald guy in a black shirt, sitting with his coffee and a shaking kid. They saw a scene they'd interrupted, not one they'd caused. The leader nudged the man beside him. "Told you she'd bolt somewhere close. Look at that, came right in here." One of the others laughed under his breath. "You want to grab her or you want me to?" Jason's voice was calm when he spoke. "Maddie." She dragged her eyes away from the men and looked up at him. "Get behind me," he said. She scrambled into the booth, pressing herself against the wall, clutching the back of his shirt like a life raft. The manager, who had been frozen like a cheap statue near the counter, cleared his throat. Can I help you gentlemen?" The leader didn't even glance at him. His gaze was locked on Jason now, measuring him. "Yeah," he said. "You can tell that little girl to come with us. Her brother's waiting outside." Maddie's breath hitched. "He's lying," she whispered. Jason heard it. So did the cop, who had turned halfway around from his radio, eyes flicking nervously between the bikers and the man they were challenging. "Don't think she wants to go anywhere with you," Jason replied. The leader's smile faded slightly. "Wasn't asking you, mate." Jason rose from the booth slowly, hands relaxed at his sides. He wasn't tall in a way that relied on height. He was tall in a way that made the space around him feel smaller. "You are now," he said. A hush fell over the diner. Someone near the back muttered, "Oh no," under their breath. The couple in the next booth edged farther away, trying to disappear into the vinyl. The leader looked Jason up and down, eyes narrowing. "You got something that belongs to us." Jason let that sit for a second. "She's not property." "She ran off while we were talking to her brother," the biker shot back. "We were gonna give him a ride home, be nice. She got spooked, that's all." Maddie's small voice trembled from behind Jason. "You choked him." A vein pulsed in the leader's temple. His eyes flickered to her, then back to Jason. "She's confused." Jason didn't blink. "Funny thing about kids," he said. "They're usually more honest than adults." The officer finally seemed to remember he had a badge. "All right, fellas, that's enough," he said, stepping forward. "You need to stay right where you are. We've got a report of a possible abduction." "Possible?" Jason echoed without looking at him. The leader snorted. "We didn't abduct nobody, we're just—" Jason took one step forward. It was small, but it changed everything. The bikers stiffened. The diners in the room leaned back as if pulled by strings. Even the hum of the old refrigerator behind the counter felt louder in the sudden silence. "Where is he?" Jason asked. The leader tilted his head. "Who?" "The boy," Jason said. "Maddie's brother, 8 years old, scared of loud noises. Where is he?" A flicker of something, amusement maybe, crossed the biker's face. "He's fine," he said. "We're just taking him for a little spin. Might teach him not to mouth off to grown men." Maddie made a strangled sound. Jason felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. "You lay a hand on him?" he asked quietly. The biker shrugged. "Kids need discipline." That was all Jason needed to hear. He moved first. One moment he was standing between Maddie and the men. The next he was in front of the leader, that single step multiplying into 3 before anyone blinked. The biker reached for something at his belt, maybe a chain, maybe a knife, but Jason's hand shot out, closing around his wrist like iron. He twisted, driving the man's arm down and sideways, forcing him to his knees in one fluid, brutal motion. The leader yelped, his sunglasses flying off his head and skittering across the floor. "Hey!" one of the others roared, lunging forward. Jason released the leader just long enough to sidestep, catching the second man by the front of his vest and slamming him against the nearest empty table. Glasses and plates exploded in a chorus of shattering porcelain. "Stop it, all of you!" the officer shouted, but his voice was swallowed by chaos. The third biker started to charge, but Jason didn't wait. He kicked a chair hard, sending it crashing into the man's knees. The biker stumbled, cursing, grabbing the back of another booth to keep from falling. Throughout it all, Jason's body stayed between the men and the booth where Maddie hid. Every move he made was angled to keep her out of their line of sight, out of their reach. The leader staggered back to his feet, face red with rage. He swung at Jason's head, fist clenched. Jason ducked, his hand snapping up to catch the man's forearm mid-swing. He leaned in close, so close the biker could feel his breath. "Where is the boy?" Sweat beaded at the man's hairline. "You don't scare me," he spat, but his voice shook. Jason tightened his grip just enough to make the man wince. "You should be scared of what happens if you don't answer." The cop finally stepped between them, drawing his weapon but not quite sure who he was aiming at. "Everybody back off," he bellowed. "Now." Jason didn't move away, but he loosened his hold slightly. The officer took in the scene: overturned tables, broken glass, 3 bikers in various stages of getting up off the floor, and looked overwhelmed. "Sir," he said to Jason, "you can't just attack people." "They snatched a kid off the street," Jason replied, still staring at the leader. "You gonna cuff me or you gonna find him?" The officer hesitated. The leader sensed that hesitation and smirked, despite the pain shooting up his arm. "You heard him, officer. This psycho's assaulting us. We haven't done a thing wrong. Ask anybody. Did you see us touch the kid?" he called out, raising his voice to the room. It was a clever move. The other diners looked down, suddenly fascinated by their plates. They'd seen Maddie's terror, but they hadn't seen the abduction. They'd only seen men walking through a door. The cop's grip on his gun tightened. Protocol ward with instinct on his face. "Look," the leader said, lowering his tone to something almost reasonable. "We'll take the girl, go outside, and bring her brother in. Everybody calms down. No harm, no foul." Maddie's breathing hitched behind Jason. "Don't let them," she whispered desperately. Jason could feel the officer wavering. If he hesitated much longer, these men would spin a story and walk right back out the door with a child. He released the biker's arm and stepped back slowly, hands rising to shoulder height to show he wasn't about to throw another punch. "You want to believe them?" Jason asked the cop quietly. "Fine, but check their bikes first, now, before they ride off with a kid screaming in the back." The officer swallowed. "We don't have probable cause to." "Probable cause," Jason snapped, patience finally cracking. He pointed behind him with his thumb. "You've got a child reporting an abduction, you've got multiple witnesses who heard her, and you've got 4 men who show up less than 2 minutes later with the same bikes she described. That's your cause." The leader laughed. "You think you know the law, pal?" Jason's gaze slid back to him. "I don't need to know the law to know what's right." The officer hesitated one more second. Then he made his choice. "Hands on the table," he ordered the bikers. "All of you, now, you move, I tase you and call backup." They cursed under their breath but grudgingly obeyed, palms flattening on the nearest table, muscles coiled and tense. The officer jerked his chin toward Jason. "You stay right there." Jason didn't argue. As long as those men weren't free to walk out, he could live with being treated like a suspect for a few minutes. Another officer, who had been half hidden behind the counter this whole time, pretending to deal with a refill, finally stepped out, nervous but resolute. I'll check the bikes," he said. "Do it," the first cop ordered. As the second officer hurried outside, the leader shot Jason a look that promised retaliation. "You have no idea what you're sticking your nose into," he growled. "We've got friends in this town. You mess with us, your life gets real complicated." Jason's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "My life was never simple," he said. Seconds dragged like hours. Maddie peeked out from behind Jason's side, cheeks still wet, eyes glued to the front windows. The whole diner held its breath. Then faintly from outside, a shout. "Officer, I got something here." Every head snapped toward the glass. The second cop's silhouette appeared, wrestling with something in the back of one of the parked bikes. He yanked open a side compartment and stepped back, horror flashing across his face. Jason felt Maddie's tiny hand clutch his. "Tyler," she whispered. And Jason knew they just crossed a line that none of those bikers would be able to talk their way back from. The second cop backed away from the bike like he'd touched fire. But Jason didn't wait for an explanation. He was already moving, walking toward the door with a slow, coiled purpose. Not running, not charging, just moving with the kind of controlled momentum that makes everyone else freeze. "Maddie," he murmured without looking back, "stay right here." Her small voice barely reached him. "Don't let them hurt him." "I won't," he promised, and somehow those 2 words were enough to anchor her trembling world. The first officer tried to step in front of Jason. "Sir, I can't let you." Jason didn't shove him. He didn't have to. He just looked at him, eyes like steel locked in on a single mission, and the officer's feet failed him. He stepped aside with the survival instinct of a man who realized this wasn't the kind of person you got in the way of. Jason pushed open the diner door and stepped outside. The dry wind met him with a sharp whistle. The sun had dipped lower, just enough to set everything in that orange, dangerous glow that made the air feel heavy. The second officer waved him over frantically. "Sir, hang on, don't come too close." Jason ignored that too. He crouched beside the open compartment. Inside, crammed into a metal storage space meant for tools or emergency equipment, was a little boy, knees tucked to his chin, wrists bound with duct tape, face smeared with dirt and tears. His small shoulder jerked with every terrified breath. "Tyler." Jason reached in. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. Tyler startled and whimpered, shrinking back from the unfamiliar voice. But Maddie's voice floated out from the doorway behind Jason like a lifeline. "Tyler." The boy's head snapped up instantly. Jason offered him his hand. "I'm a friend of your sister S," he whispered. "Let's get you out." Tyler hesitated only a second before placing his bound wrists into Jason's palms. Jason cut the tape with the cop's pocket knife and lifted the boy gently into his arms. Tyler flinched but didn't pull away. He clung to Jason's shirt with a desperate strength that broke something inside everyone watching. Inside the diner, Maddie gasped, hands pressed to her mouth. When Jason stepped back through the door carrying her brother, she ran to them so fast she nearly tripped. Both kids collided in a tangled, sobbing embrace. Tyler's arms wrapped around her neck like he was afraid she might disappear again. Jason crouched beside them, one hand on each of their backs, steadying their shaking forms. Behind him, the bikers were no longer pretending. They weren't smirking. They weren't joking. They weren't posturing. They were pale, silent, sweating. The leader tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. We weren't gonna hurt him. Jason stood. And this time, when he walked toward them, there was no officer who dared get in his way. The leader swallowed hard and stepped back until his legs hit a chair. Hey man, listen, this isn't what it looks like. Jason didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You grabbed two kids, he said. You hurt one, you terrorized the other, and you left him stuffed in a metal box like trash. One of the bikers stammered, It was just a scare tactic, we weren't. Jason stepped closer, and the man's voice died. You think kids are tools, Jason said. Weapons, toys you can break and replace. No one answered. Because there was no answer that would keep their bones intact. The first officer raised a hand, voice trembling. Jason, look, sir, we've got enough to arrest them. Charges, evidence, just let us handle it. Jason paused. He looked at the children clinging to each other behind him. He looked at the 4 grown men who had choked an 8-year-old boy, ripped a 6-year-old girl's shirt, dragged them off the street, and stuffed one into a compartment like luggage. And then he looked at the officer. You'll handle it, Jason asked quietly. Yes, the cop said, a promise, we will. Jason stared at him for a long second. Then Jason stepped back half an inch. Not approval. Not forgiveness. Just a thin, controlled margin of restraint. The officers moved instantly, yelling commands, slapping cuffs onto shaking wrists, forcing the bikers down onto their knees. The leather-clad men who swaggered into the diner as if they owned the world were now begging, stumbling over excuses, swearing it was all a misunderstanding. The cuffs clicked shut one by one. But Jason didn't watch them. He walked back toward the booth where Maddie and Tyler sat gripping each other like two halves of the same soul. Maddie looked up first, eyes red, voice shaky. Are they gone? They will be, Jason said gently. Tyler sniffed. Are we safe now? Jason crouched again, resting a steady hand over the boy's shoulder. You're safe, he told him. No one is ever going to lay a hand on you or your sister again. Tyler's lip wobbled. Maddie leaned her forehead against Jason's arm like a child leaning on a mountain. The officers radioed for backup outside. The bikers were hauled to their feet, faces drained, wrists locked behind their backs. One spat a curse at Jason as he was dragged out the door. Jason didn't even turn his head. He was focused only on the 2 kids, who'd survived something no child ever should. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. The diner slowly returned to its timid silence. People whispered. Someone cried softly in the back. A waitress set down 2 glasses of water with trembling hands. Finally, when the chaos had thinned, and the officers had driven away with the men shackled in the back seats, Jason spoke again. You 2 got someone to call, he asked, voice gentler than anything else in the room. Maddie nodded. Mom, she's at work, she didn't know. Let's call her then. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. Will you stay until she gets here? Jason didn't hesitate. Yeah, he said, I'll stay. And he did. He sat with them, 1 kid on each side, until their mother burst into the diner, crying harder than both of them combined, and folded her children into her arms. She thanked Jason 100 times. He told her she didn't need to thank him even once. But as he finally stood to leave, Maddie tugged at his sleeve. Jason, she whispered. Yeah, you saved us. Jason rested a hand lightly on her small shoulder. No, he said, You saved yourselves. You ran until someone heard you." Then he glanced toward the door where the bikers had stood, feeling that quiet storm settle back into his bones. "And I just made sure they regretted touching you." Maddie nodded, and for the first time since she ran into the diner, she managed a tiny, shaky smile. Jason walked out into the fading sunset, hands in his pockets, shoulders steady, footsteps quiet. Behind him, in that little diner with flickering lights and half-eaten plates, every person who'd seen what he did that day understood one thing. Those men didn't just pick on the wrong kid. They picked on the wrong man. And someone like Jason Statham doesn't let people like that walk away unchanged.